In this video, we're going to learn about the digestive system. You can use this video or the slide deck to complete the handout that goes along with the digestive system. So as you know, organ systems is when you have several organs, group of organs working together to do a common task in the body. In your body, we have 11 defined organ systems. The ones that we're going to focus on in grade 10 are primarily the circulatory system, digestive system, and respiratory system, but you should be familiar with the function of the other systems as well. Today, we're going to focus on the digestive system. I always recommend that students watch the preview videos at the start of a slide deck. You don't have to memorize everything from here. It's just a great way to prime your brain to be ready for the new terminology that you may learn, and to see some great visuals that will just make the learning in this lesson a lot easier for you. So the digestive system is an organ system that's made up of your digestive tract and the accessory organs. We'll learn what all those things mean soon. The main function of the digestive system includes ingestion, so that's taking in food, digestion, which is breaking down food into smaller parts, smaller nutrients, absorption, once the food is broken down into smaller nutrients. Absorption is basically when you take those nutrients and then put them into your blood. And a lot of that usually happens in your intestines. So intestines absorb the nutrients and put them into your blood so you can deliver them all over the body. So absorption is a major function of the digestive system. And then elimination. Whatever you don't absorb or use or need, you basically get rid of. So you poop it out. And that's called elimination. So you can see that here. This cat is ingesting some food. The food is being broken down into smaller pieces. That's digestion. Some of the smaller pieces are being absorbed into the blood, and then the undigested, unused stuff gets eliminated. So these are the four major functions of the digestive system. In the digestive system, there's two types of digestions that you'll see. In other words, there's two ways to break down food. There's mechanical digestion, which is physically breaking down the food. So chewing with your teeth, churning in your stomach. So the strong muscles of your stomach crushing food. That's mechanical or also physical digestion. There's chemical digestion, which is when you break down food with chemicals. So there's enzymes in your body that help to break down food. There's also stomach acid, for example. So those are the two types of digestion we'll be focusing on as we go through the digestive system. Here you can see an example of that. So this is a starch molecule, so a big sugary molecule. When you eat food that has starch in it, you have enzymes from your saliva, like your spit, that will help to break down the starch. And that's an example of the chemical digestion. Whereas here we're crunching the apple and crushing it with our teeth. That would be mechanical digestion. So again, the whole goal of the digestive system is to break down food into smaller molecules so that you can absorb it into the blood. And then once it's in the blood, your blood can deliver those smaller nutrients all over to your body cells. So things like sugar need to go to your body cells so you can do cellular respiration. And so how do you get sugar into the blood? Well, it comes in your food, so you have to break it down first, then it can be absorbed and then go into the blood. So these are the main organs of digestion we'll be studying. We have the mouth and associated organs, so mouth and organs within it, esophagus, stomach, intestines, both small and large, and then something called accessory organs, which are your pancreas, liver, and gallbladder. This is the flow of food from mouth all the way out of your bum after. You have mouth, then you go to esophagus, then you go to stomach, then you go to the small intestine, then the food goes to the large intestine where it basically exits through the rectum and then the anus. I know these organs here weren't mentioned. The food doesn't go in these organs. That's why they're called accessories. It doesn't directly touch food, but it does help in other ways by sending, let's just say, care packages and other helpful tools to the organs that actually touch your food. And we'll see that in more detail as well. One important thing that we'll also study in this video and in the lesson are some specialized cells and tissues in the digestive system. So your digestive system has some smooth muscle tissue, and the smooth muscle tissue, the one special thing about smooth muscle tissue is that it's actually able to contract and relax without you thinking about it. It's involuntary, we say. And so that's important because you don't want to have to think about You don't have to tell your intestines to move and push your food through. You don't have to tell your esophagus to move and push your food through. So the fact that it's made up of this smooth muscle tissue really allows you to push food through your intestinal tract and digestive tract without thinking about it, without any conscious thought. We'll also see that there's a lot of nerve tissue within the digestive system as well. And that nerve tissue will help to send signals to coordinate the movement that the muscle tissues can do. There's epithelial tissue. Epithelial tissue has a lot of little cells called goblet cells, which will help to make mucus to protect your digestive tract and allow the food to move through smoothly. And there's also a lot of connective tissue like blood vessels and other structures used for absorption and also used to help nourish parts of your digestive tract as well. So the main point is that your digestive tract is a system. It's made of organs. Those organs have specialized tissues in them, which have specialized cells to do different jobs. So let's start with the mouth. That's our first organ of digestion. That's where ingestion takes place, where you take in the food. Okay. In the mouth, there's mechanical digestion that happens. Your teeth are used to chew the food up, to break it down. But then there's also chemical digestion. You have these special glands over here, some just above, below your ear here, some below your tongue. They release saliva into your mouth while you're eating. And the saliva contains enzymes, which are special chemical molecules that will help to break down bigger molecules into smaller ones. So one specific enzyme is called amylase. One trick you'll learn in grade 11 and 12 biology is whenever you see A's, that's an enzyme. So amylase helps to break down starch in a chemical way. So basically you chew up your food, you cover it in saliva, and once your food is all chewed up and covered in saliva, that mixture of food and saliva and crushed up stuff is called a bolus. So the bolus is basically ready to start going to the stomach. So what you do is you use your tongue to push the bolus of food to the back of your throat, which is called your pharynx. This part here is the back of your throat right here. That's called your pharynx. And basically at this point, you can start to swallow, and your food's about to go into the next part called the esophagus. So this is the esophagus. The esophagus is a muscular tube that goes from the mouth pharynx area all the way down to the stomach. So this over here is the liver. So the stomach is behind the liver over here. Okay. So the food will go down the esophagus into the stomach. Now, one common misconception that students have is they often think, oh, okay, food just falls down like through gravity. That's not true. Food is actually pushed down through a muscular motion called peristalsis. So it's not really gravity doing that. It's almost like you can think of it like when you squeeze toothpaste out of a toothpaste tube. It's the same idea. You're squeezing the food through using this muscular motion called peristalsis. And that's why you can eat upside down. Right? If it was gravity, you wouldn't be able to eat upside down. But if you hang from a tree with your feet on the branch and your head facing the ground and you try to eat, or you try to hang upside down off your couch and try to eat, I wouldn't recommend it because it can get messy and it could still be dangerous. But you will be able to swallow and your food will still go up to your stomach if you're facing up. So again, here's someone trying to eat upside down, and you can see that they can do it. They actually could consume this because peristalsis will push their food up to their stomach. It's not gravity. So our next organ after we've passed through the esophagus is our stomach. So we've entered the stomach at this point here. In the stomach, you have mechanical and chemical digestion as well. The mechanical digestion is the muscular contraction. So your muscles are contracting to squish the food. The chemical digestion is your gastric juices, which is basically just stomach juices that contain hydrochloric acid, and that helps to break food molecules down into smaller food molecules. At the point where your food is all covered in acid and all crushed up, your food now becomes chyme. So it's called chyme. So once we're ready to move on, we're about to go into our intestine, specifically our small intestine. So all this mess over here, this stuff here, small. This is your large intestine here, but this is your small one. So we're about to enter the small intestine at this point. So this is our stomach here. Okay. Our stomach contains a variety of different types of tissue. So we have smooth muscle tissue in our stomach, which allows for the stomach to crush stuff without even thinking about it. It also has nerve tissue, which allows you to control the movement of your stomach. It has epithelial tissue, which has goblet cells and specialized cells that make enzymes and acid as well. It has connective tissue, basically some blood vessels and other structures that help to nourish the stomach as well. So the idea here again is that the stomach is an organ, and you could zoom in and take a look at all the different tissues that it's made up of, and you could take a look at all the different cells that those tissues are made up of, because it follows that hierarchy of biological organization. So, like I said, now we're in the small intestine. The small intestine is often confused with being the smaller of the two intestines, and it's not true in terms of length. The small intestine is actually the longer intestine. It's longer than the large intestine. It's about 20 feet long. The reason it's called small intestine is because it has a smaller diameter than the large intestine, but lengthwise, it's a longer one. And that's important because the small intestine actually is responsible for most of your nutrient absorption. So when the food enters your small intestine, it's pretty much all crushed up and broken down into small nutrients, and this is where the nutrients will be absorbed into the blood, so it can be delivered everywhere. And you want that small intestine to be long, so you have a lot of time to absorb as many nutrients as possible for your body to use. So the idea is that small intestine is responsible for the majority of the nutrient absorption, and nutrients include things like proteins, carbs, fats, among other things. Um, so, what allows the small intestine to be so good at that job? Well, first of all, the small intestine again has a smooth muscle tissue like the rest of your intestinal tract, to allow it to move and do stuff without you thinking about it. Nervous tissue to control that movement. Connective tissue, so a lot of blood vessels around, and it has epithelial tissue with specialized cells. And the ones we're going to focus on are these villi. So if you were to zoom in to your intestine, you'd see these little folds in the intestine, and those little folds are called villi. And so what those folds do is they increase the surface area. They give the intestine more surface area to allow it to absorb more nutrients. And you'll notice in the villi, there's also little blood vessels. Those little blood vessels are called capillaries. And the idea is that the food goes into the villi, through the villi, and then into the capillaries. And the villi, again, these little folds that give you maximum surface area for maximum nutrient absorption. And you have a lot of these capillaries, these very thin, small and thin blood vessels to absorb the nutrients as the food goes from the intestine through the villi into the blood. So again, that's super important to remember, the capillaries here. This is a zoom in, a close-up look at the villi, and you can see the capillaries right there. Nutrients would go through here into the blood and then can be delivered throughout the body. It's important that these structures are fairly thin to allow for the nutrients to move from one structure to another. If they were too thick, it would be very difficult. That movement of nutrients from the intestine through the cells and into the blood vessels, that's called diffusion. So when substances move from one cell to another, one part of a cell to another, we say they diffuse through. So once in the blood, then the nutrients can be delivered throughout the body. But we're not on our journey yet. The food is still not, the other parts have still not exited the body, and there's still things that we can extract from our food. So basically, after we've traveled all the way through our small intestine, we are ready to enter the large intestine next. Okay. Before we get into the large intestine, one thing to think about is, how do you fit all this intestine into your body? Well, it's kind of like that DNA idea. The DNA, there's 2 meters in a nucleus, so it's all kind of condensed up and coiled up. Well, it's the same idea here. Your small intestine is coiled up, so you can fit it into your body. So again, you have 20 feet of intestine that fits into someone that might not even be 6 feet tall, and that's because it's all coiled up. So before we go into our large intestine, I want to just do an aside and take a look at the accessory organs. The accessory organs are the liver, the gallbladder, and the pancreas. They're called accessories because they help with digestion, but they don't directly touch the food. So the pancreas right here, its main job is to send sodium bicarbonate, which is just baking soda. You might remember it as being a base, to the small intestine. And that will help to neutralize the chyme, the acidic chyme that enters from the stomach in the small intestine here, so that the small intestine doesn't get damaged, because it doesn't have a thick muscular wall like the stomach to protect it. The pancreas also helps to control your blood sugar by producing a hormone called insulin. So in a way, the pancreas is part of two systems. It's part of its digestive system, this part here, and then also part of the endocrine system, where it produces insulin. The liver is another accessory organ. It makes a substance called bile, which helps you to break down fat. And then the gallbladder, just underneath the liver here, that's going to receive the bile from the liver to store it until you need it. And then when you need it, the gallbladder will deliver it to the small intestine to help break down fat there. So now we're done in the small intestine and we're going into the large intestine, also called the colon. The large intestine is only larger in diameter. Lengthwise, though, it's shorter than the small intestine. It's about 5 feet long. Its primary function is to absorb water from your food, so water absorption. It also does some vitamin synthesis. It has some special bacteria that help to produce some vitamin K, which helps to control bleeding. So that's your large intestine. Essentially, the food kind of goes up, across, then down, and then it essentially rests in the rectum here until you're ready to poop, and then it can go out the anus. Once your food is sort of ready to come out through elimination, through the rectum and anus, we call it feces at that point. It's essentially food, the parts of the food that you don't need at the moment that aren't absorbed into the blood and you just need to get rid of through the process of elimination. So how long does all this take? This takes generally between 24 to 72 hours. It varies depending on what type of food you've eaten, your health at the time. A variety of factors affect this, but about 24 to 72 hours. So we're going to take a quick look at a sample problem that I want you to try to solve or to explain. So I'm going to provide you with a few pictures or a few questions, and I want you to try to think about the answer using your knowledge of what the different parts of the digestive system do. So suppose not enough water is absorbed into the bloodstream. What would happen? So remember, your large intestines are responsible for taking water out of your food. So suppose you don't absorb enough water. What that means is that a lot of water stays in your undigested food. So a lot of water is coming out of you. So if you guess that you will likely have diarrhea, that's correct. You would likely have diarrhea. So if not enough water is taken out, so a lot of water stays in there, then your poop comes out with lots of water in it, very watery. That's diarrhea. Now, suppose that the large intestine took out too much water, so it really dried up what was left over. Well, if you guess constipation, that's correct. If you take out too much water, your poop becomes too hard, and then you're constipated. And different conditions can lead to that. So certain bacterial infections, certain sicknesses, certain foods that you might eat, depending on your genetics, could lead to constipation as opposed to diarrhea. So here we have a condition that affects our digestive system. It's called lactose intolerance. Lactose is the sugar that's found in milk. And what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to try to use these figures over here to explain the concept of lactose intolerance. So you can try to pause the video and then you can try to write down a little paragraph or point form explanation of what lactose intolerance is based on this picture. Try to use the keywords there. Try to look at the illustrations, the labels, to try to explain the concept. So I'm going to explain it now. I'm assuming you've paused the video and tried it yourself, and then you can check your answer based on what I'm explaining. So on this side here, you can see someone who's lactose tolerant. In other words, they can handle sugar from milk. And so here's the small intestine. Lactose goes through. When lactose enters the small intestine, there's a special enzyme here called lactase. It'll break lactose up into glucose and galactose. That goes into the blood, and then we deliver it to the body so the body can do cellular respiration. And we're done. That's great. Someone has the lactase enzyme, lactose tolerant. Let's go to the lactose intolerant person. Lactose enters small intestine. Interesting. We're missing lactase. It's not there. So lactose actually makes it all the way through the small intestine and goes into the large intestine. Once it gets into the large intestine, there's bacteria there, special bacteria, that love lactose. So they will take lactose and they will break it down, not the way we want, unfortunately. And as they do that, they release acids and gases, and that's what leads to the bloatiness and the abdominal pain, all that gas that's produced from the bacteria breaking down the lactose in your large intestine. So if you're lactose tolerant, you have the enzyme lactase. It stops the lactose from going to the large intestine. But if you are lactose intolerant, you don't have the enzyme. And so as a result, lactose goes through, the bacteria get them in the large intestine, and it makes you all bloated and uncomfortable. So how can you fix that? Well, you can consume the enzyme before you eat something that has a lot of dairy or lactose in it. And if you consume the enzyme, then you can help break down lactose before it gets to your large intestine. You could also reduce how much dairy you're eating. Another common condition you'll see in the digestive system is heartburn. So heartburn is basically when you have too much stomach acid, it goes back up into your esophagus, and your stomach acid won't hurt the stomach itself because it's very thick, but it will hurt the esophagus because it's not as thick and it doesn't have as much mucus to protect it. So the acid is really going to start to damage the esophagus. So how can you solve that? Well, you might remember your chemistry knowledge. There's a lot of acid. What can you do? Neutralize it with a base. And we already learned that. That's called an antacid, which is typically a base like aluminum hydroxide, magnesium hydroxide, reacts with the excess acid to neutralize it so it's not damaging your esophagus. And so in this video, we saw the digestive system, all the organs of digestion, the function of digestion, structures of cells and tissues of the digestive system, as well as certain conditions that might affect your digestive system, like heartburn and lactose intolerant. And we made some connections between chemistry and biology when we studied heartburn. And we also technically made connections over here as well because we saw chemical reactions and enzyme help to break down this chemical. We saw chemical reactions with the hydrochloric acid breaking down food. So as you go through these presentations, through these lessons, try to make connections with other units because science really is an integrated, connected field. It's not really broken up into units in real life. You just break it up like that to make it easier to learn, but everything's connected. So look for those connections everywhere.